My boyfriend secretly filmed me sleeping and undressing. I, 37F, have been with my boyfriend, 39M, for 2 years. 6 months ago, we took the big leap and moved in together. Up until 3 days ago, I genuinely believed I was living in a healthy, supportive, and safe relationship. Now, I am sitting in a cold hotel room, looking at my reflection in the mirror and wondering how I could have been so blind to the person sleeping next to me. Moving in together was supposed to be the start of our forever. We spent weeks picking out furniture, arguing over where the rug should go, and setting up our bedroom to be a sanctuary. When we first moved in, his mother gave us a housewarming gift, a sleek, modern digital alarm clock. It has a large, mirrored face and a black plastic body. At the time, I thought it was a thoughtful, if slightly boring, gift. He insisted on putting it on his nightstand at first, but a few months ago, he moved it to mine, saying he wanted me to be able to see the time more easily since I'm the one who usually hits snooze. Looking back, that was the first red flag I missed. He made such a show of caring about my morning routine. I work a demanding job in healthcare, and I've been struggling with fatigue lately. I complain about it, a lot. I tell him how I toss and turn, how I never feel rested, and how I probably need to see a sleep specialist. He would always listen intently, nodding, and saying things like, "We really need to figure out what's going on with you at night, babe." I thought it was sweet. I thought he was my partner in solving the mystery of my exhaustion. The discovery happened on Tuesday. I was working a late shift and had a few hours in the morning to catch up on housework. I was vacuuming the bedroom when I realized I couldn't find one of my favorite diamond stud earrings. I remembered taking them off near the bed the night before. I got down on my hands and knees, searching the carpet, and eventually traced the potential rolling path to under my nightstand. I had to move the alarm clock to reach into the crevice between the stand and the wall. When I picked it up, I felt something shift inside the casing. It didn't feel like a solid piece of electronics, it felt hollow and loose. I turned it over in my hands, noticing that the back panel didn't quite sit flush against the frame. I'm naturally a bit curious, or maybe it was just a gut instinct I didn't know I had, so I jiggled the plastic. A small panel, disguised as a battery compartment, popped open. Inside, there were no AA batteries. Tucked into a custom-carved foam insert was a tiny, high-definition camera lens. It was positioned perfectly behind a two-way mirrored section of the clock face. I looked at the angle of the clock on my nightstand and realized it wasn't just pointed at the room, it was angled directly at the pillows on my side of the mattress. Specifically, at the height of my chest and head. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine that I can only describe as a physical jolt. My hands started shaking so violently I almost dropped the clock. I unplugged the cord from the wall and noticed a micro SD card slotted into the side of the internal camera unit. I know people will say I should have waited for him to come home. I know people will say I shouldn't have looked. But I was in my own home, feeling like a stranger was watching me, and I needed to know the extent of it. I took the card to my laptop. My heart was thudding against my ribs so hard it was painful. When the folder opened, my stomach dropped through the floor. There were hundreds of files. Hundreds. They were all short, motion-activated clips. The timestamps went back months, almost to the week he moved the clock to my side of the bed. I clicked on a few. Some were just of me sleeping, my hair messy, my mouth slightly open. But as I scrolled, I found clips of me getting out of the shower. Clips of me undressing for bed. Clips of me standing in front of the mirror in my underwear, checking my skin or adjusting my clothes. In many of them, I was completely naked, thinking I was in the absolute privacy of my own bedroom. In one video, I could see the door to the bedroom slightly ajar. He was in the other room, and I could hear him humming to himself while I was being recorded without my consent. The level of premeditation was sickening. This wasn't a glitch. This was a surveillance operation. I didn't even have time to process the clips before I heard his key in the lock. I didn't hide the clock. I didn't hide the laptop. I sat on the edge of the bed, the SD card sitting on the duvet like a poisonous insect. When he walked in, he saw the clock unplugged and the back panel off. His face didn't go pale with guilt. It went tight with anger. "Why are you messing with that?" he asked. Not, "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" but a defensive strike. "I found it," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "I found the camera. I saw the videos." He paused for a second, then his entire demeanor shifted. He let out a small, condescending laugh. He walked over, tried to put his hand on my shoulder, but I flinched away so hard I almost fell off the bed. "Oh, babe," he said, using that soft, reasonable voice he uses when he thinks I'm being emotional. "Don't be like that. I was going to tell you eventually. I was just worried about your sleep patterns. You're always so tired, and you talk about how you can't rest. I wanted to gather data. I thought if I could see how much you move or if you have apnea, I could help you improve your sleep hygiene. It was a surprise. I was going to show you the sleep report I was making for you. A sleep report? I screamed. There are videos of me naked. There are videos of me changing. How does me putting on a bra help my sleep hygiene? He didn't miss a beat. Well, the camera is motion activated, I can't help what it catches. I just delete the stuff that isn't relevant. I'm doing this because I love you, and you're being incredibly ungrateful right now. The gaslighting was so thick I could practically taste it. He was looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong by discovering his secret. He told me I was delusional for calling it a violation of privacy and that partners shouldn't have secrets about health. I didn't argue anymore. I realized in that moment that you cannot reason with someone who doesn't see you as a person with rights, but as a project to be monitored. I grabbed my large suitcase from the closet. I started throwing things in: clothes, my jewelry box, my passport, my laptop. He followed me around the apartment, his voice getting louder and more frantic. You're seriously doing this? You're ruining a 2-year relationship over an alarm clock? You're being so dramatic. Where are you even going? You're acting like a crazy person. I didn't answer him. I walked out the door with one suitcase and my purse. I checked into a hotel about 20 minutes away, using a name he wouldn't immediately think of, my mother's maiden name, just in case he tried to track my card. Since I left, my phone has been a war zone. He is sending me manifestos, huge paragraphs about his intentions. He sent me screenshots of articles about sleep apnea and how monitoring is a common tool for diagnosis. He keeps saying he is shocked and heartbroken that I would throw away our life over a misunderstanding of his concern. But it isn't just him. His best friend, who I always thought was a decent guy, texted me yesterday. He said, "Hey, I talked to him and he's a wreck. Look, I get that the camera thing is a bit weird, but his heart was in the right place. He's just a tech nerd who cares too much. You're being way too harsh by ghosting him and staying in a hotel. Just come home and talk it out like adults. You're making him look like some kind of creep, and he isn't. I feel like I'm being hunted by a group of people who don't understand the word consent. I can't sleep. Even in this hotel room, I've checked every smoke detector, every mirror, and every outlet. I feel like there is a lens on me at all times. I feel dirty. I feel like the 2 years we spent together were a lie, and he was just waiting for the chance to put me under a microscope. Am I the jerk? Am I being irrational and dramatic? Everyone in his circle is acting like I've committed a crime by leaving, but I feel like I've escaped a predator. Update. It has been several months since I last posted, and the situation didn't calm down the way I hoped it would. When I left the apartment and checked into that second hotel, I thought distance would give both of us time to cool off. Instead, it triggered something much worse. At first the messages continued the same way they had before, long paragraphs insisting he had done nothing wrong, repeating the explanation about sleep monitoring and health concerns. Those texts turned into emails when I blocked his number. When I blocked that email, messages started arriving from new phone numbers. Every time I shut one door, another number appeared within hours. The pattern became relentless. Some messages were pleading and apologetic, promising he would never do anything like that again and begging me to come home. Others shifted into accusations about how I had betrayed him and destroyed a 2-year relationship over something he still insisted was meant to help me. Blocking numbers became a daily routine. By the end of the first week there were dozens of them. Some were obviously him using different prepaid lines. Others came from messaging apps or temporary numbers that disappeared once they were blocked. The tone of those messages swung wildly between emotional manipulation and outright hostility. The pressure wasn't limited to my phone. Mutual acquaintances started reaching out, asking why I had run away instead of talking things through. The narrative circulating around him framed the situation like a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Several people repeated the same explanation he had given about gathering sleep data and trying to help my fatigue. I stopped responding to anyone connected to him. During that time I also began making practical decisions about separating my life from his. I arranged for a police escort so I could return to the apartment once and collect the rest of my belongings. That visit lasted less than 20 minutes. 2 officers stood in the living room while I packed essentials from the bedroom and bathroom. He wasn't there, which made the process easier, but the tension in that space was overwhelming. The alarm clock was gone. So was the laptop he usually used in the evenings. After that visit I signed a lease for a small apartment closer to my workplace and tried to focus on moving forward. The harassment escalated once he realized I had no intention of returning. Messages started arriving late at night and early in the morning from unfamiliar numbers. Some contained long explanations about technology and medical research. Others were attempts to guilt me into reconsidering. A few included photos from our past trips together with captions about memories and promises we had made. Then the unannounced visits started. The first time he showed up outside my new building was about 3 weeks after I moved in. I noticed his car parked across the street when I came home from work. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then he stepped out of the vehicle and walked toward the entrance. The conversation that followed happened on the sidewalk in front of several neighbors. He tried to frame the entire situation as a misunderstanding and asked for another chance to explain himself. When I told him to leave and never come back, the calm tone disappeared. His voice got louder and more frustrated, insisting that I was ruining both our lives by refusing to listen. A neighbor eventually stepped outside and asked if everything was okay. That moment seemed to snap him back into control. He left without further confrontation. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 days later a message arrived from another new number, referencing the encounter outside my building and accusing me of humiliating him in front of strangers. The messages after that became more erratic. Over the next few weeks he showed up at my apartment complex multiple times. Sometimes he stayed in the car across the street. Other times he walked up to the entrance and tried calling my phone repeatedly. I never went outside when I saw him there. The situation crossed another line when he appeared at my workplace. I work in healthcare, and the building has a public reception area where patients check in before appointments. One afternoon the receptionist called me to the front desk because someone was asking to see me. When I walked out and saw him standing in the waiting area, my stomach dropped. He tried to act calm and casual, telling the receptionist he had come by to drop something off. The item was a small envelope containing printed photos of us from earlier in the relationship. The receptionist looked uncomfortable and asked if everything was okay. I told her quietly that he was not supposed to be there and asked security to escort him out. After that incident my workplace filed an internal report and instructed staff to notify security if he returned. He did return. 2 weeks later he showed up again near the end of my shift and waited in the parking lot. A coworker spotted him sitting in the car and alerted security before I even walked outside. The building manager contacted local police to have him removed from the property. At that point it became obvious that ignoring the situation wasn't going to make it stop. I met with a lawyer and explained everything that had happened since I left the apartment. The hidden camera, the recorded footage, the constant messages, and the repeated appearances at my home and workplace. The lawyer advised filing a domestic dispute complaint and documenting every incident. That process required gathering evidence. I saved every message he had sent from the various numbers. Screenshots filled an entire folder on my computer. Many of them were pages long, repeating the same arguments about how his actions had been misunderstood. Others were shorter but more aggressive, accusing me of ruining his reputation or trying to make him look like a criminal. Security footage from my apartment building and workplace confirmed the times he had appeared there. The SD card from the camera was also turned over to investigators. Once the complaint was filed, the situation moved quickly. Law enforcement contacted him and issued a formal warning instructing him to stop contacting me and stay away from both my residence and workplace. For a brief period it seemed like the warning worked. Then the messages started again. They arrived through new numbers that hadn't been used before. The tone was angrier this time, suggesting that filing the complaint had crossed a line and that I was exaggerating the entire situation to damage his life. Those messages became part of the case file as well. Eventually the case moved forward to court. The process took several months. During that time both sides provided statements and evidence. The recordings from the camera were reviewed by investigators. The message logs documenting the harassment were also presented. Sitting in a courtroom listening to those details laid out in a formal setting was surreal. What had once felt like a private relationship problem was now being examined by attorneys, investigators, and a jury. His defense focused heavily on the original explanation about monitoring sleep patterns. They argued that his intentions had been misunderstood and that the device had been installed out of concern for my health. The prosecution focused on consent and privacy, along with the pattern of harassment that followed after I left. The footage on the SD card played a significant role. The clips clearly showed the camera capturing private moments in the bedroom over several months. Investigators explained how the device had been modified to hide the lens inside the alarm clock and how the recordings were stored. The timeline of messages and visits after I left the apartment also became part of the trial. Witnesses from my workplace described the incidents where he appeared in the building and parking lot. Security staff confirmed they had escorted him away from the property more than once. Neighbors from my apartment complex testified about seeing him waiting outside the building on multiple occasions. Listening to those accounts was uncomfortable but necessary. When the jury returned with their decision, they found him guilty of the charges related to unlawful recording and harassment connected to the domestic dispute complaint. The The sentencing hearing happened a few weeks later. The judge addressed both the privacy violation and the repeated attempts to contact me after being told to stop. The final sentence included legal penalties and restrictions preventing him from contacting me in the future. Walking out of the courthouse that day felt different from the moment I left the apartment months earlier. Back then everything felt chaotic and confusing. The constant pressure from his messages and the opinions of people around him had made me question my own reaction. The court proceedings made one thing very clear: what happened in that bedroom was not a misunderstanding. It was a violation of trust and privacy that escalated into harassment when I refused to accept it. The legal process took time, but it created boundaries that hadn't existed before. Since the sentencing, the messages have stopped completely. For the first time in months my phone has been quiet. Life has gradually returned to a routine that doesn't involve checking every corner of a room or wondering whether someone might be watching. The apartment I live in now feels like a place where privacy actually exists again. Looking back, leaving that day with a suitcase was the moment everything changed. It also turned out to be the decision that ultimately protected me.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.